So let's get started. And so this is going to be a little bit of a takeoff from what we were talking about the last 4 or 5 weeks or so about, kind of making contact with the future. And it's really about really time. And we kind of ended last week's pulling uh, uh, contact, making contact with the future, right? Pulling together the three sessions we did on that last week, and we kind of ended it with a little bit of a teaser about time. And so we're going to spend a little bit about, we'll spend some time today just talking about, kind of the illusions of time and the illusions that we have about it. Some of that's just how we were brought up and at a societal level and all that, but how time is really more of a friend maybe than we might think it is, and how malleable it is. So when we left last week, one of the slides we had towards the end was talking about the observer effect. And we're going to spend more time talking about that next week and the week after. I think time is a good lead up into that. And so the observer effect kind of looks like this, that in science and laboratory experiments, for instance, when a certain project or experiment, when the people conducting it are really focused on the experiment, they get a slightly different outcome. And we talked a little bit about the placebo effect last week, right? Where that you have, when they do drug testing, they actually test against a placebo, right? They actually test the drug against the placebo. And so the observer effect is really about where we place our attention. When we place our attention on something, it does impact it. That's the observer effect, okay? In a very non-scientific, kind of street jargon way, that's what that is, right? And we all know this, right? When we focus our time and attention on things, where we focus on our kids, we focus on our health, we focus on our project, we focus our thoughts and our energies in certain places, we know it has a material change. And that's really what what the observer effect is. And then we talked about the illusion of time. And according to Ravelli, time is an illusion. It's our perception of it doesn't really correspond to the physical reality. And what he talks about time is, we look at time. Time is really sequences of events, right? So on one hand, we're all wearing watches, and I was just telling Amanda this morning, and I went for a 5-mile run on Saturday morning, and my time was 30 seconds per mile longer than the others. I guess I was just having a good time, and I was just doing my thing, right? I wasn't really focused on my time, but if I was focused more on my mile time, all right, my mile time would have been more like an 8:50, which is usually what it is, something like that. And so we use time as basically a measurement tool for events. So in one hand, time is entirely made up. I mean, there is the whole solar cycle, 365 days is what it takes to orbit the sun. And there are certain, it's based on certain things, but 12 o'clock, 12 o'clock could be, could be 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, what I'm saying is that it's all made up. It's one of the reasons, so if you think about colors, right? Well, we've labeled red a color when we were growing up. Well, how do you know if you named a blue, would it be any, blue might look red, right? It's all about the labels we put on things. And so time kind of runs that way. So certainly in a linear sense about time, if I had to go to the Manchester airport to catch a flight to Chicago at 1 o'clock and I missed it, well, I missed it, okay? That's like a real thing. So we use time in sequences of measurement for past, present, future events, okay? But that's really what it is. And it's very, and the way we know time, right, in our watch type way, in a calendar way, right, it's very linear. So I think that's the illusion. That's kind of speaks to what the illusion of time is that on one hand, it is something that we've kind of made up to basically kind of keep track of things. But on other times, if you think about it for a second, driving, we've all had this experience where we've been driving, and all of a sudden we start daydreaming, and a half hour has gone by and we go by a certain exit, we're like, holy smokes, how did I get here? Okay. Time went by just like that. So there's time that we measure, and then there's time kind of that can't be measured. And that breaks down into the two types of time, which is linear time and nonlinear. So linear time is just kind of like what we were talking about. It's kind of a timeline, and one of the first graphics I have here is like timeline in the United States. So that's how general time works, and it's how it works in our calendars and our, we have appointments during the day, and I got to be at a certain place at a certain time. And we have a clock. It's a 24-hour clock, right? All that type of stuff. So that's how it works, kind of in a linear way. Other linear aspects of time would be if I bought a barbecue grill, all right, and I had to put it together. I don't know why I would do that, but if I did, I'm sure the $50 they charge you at Home Depot to put it together is well worth it. But if I had to put it together, I'd have these list of parts, right? And I'd have to follow the list to put it together. That's linear. And it's going to take me so much time to do that because I'm following a linear process. And so you think about our time, okay? Our traditional time as we know it, right, is linear. So we have to follow certain things. Then my other graphic on here is a highway. So just like we were talking about just like I was just talking about, we've all had this. We've all, driven, and then all of a sudden we've gone 20 minutes or 10 minutes or a half hour, and you're like, holy smokes! But your body, you were on autopilot, and time went by just like that. Okay, so and then conversely, if I got on a highway and I had to go right this morning, I went from Keene to Bedford. Okay, well, that's going to take me somewhere between an hour and 20 minutes because I'm on this linear pathway. I'm on this linear road, and it's so many miles, and it's going to take me longer to get there. Okay, it's going to take whatever it takes based on my speed and all that, and that's linear. So I hope those kind of examples of linear can resonate. That makes sense, everybody? About linear, nonlinear. All right. So chat in questions as we're going along here, or questions or comments. So now let's talk about the fun part, which is nonlinear. So we'll go back to our buddy Einstein, right? And as we've talked about, right, he was a hard science guy, but he kind of knew that there was more what was going on here than just his hard physics. And so one of the things, right, that always talked about was the magic of intuition. So intuition is nonlinear. Okay, when you know something, right, you just know it, right? You've skipped all the linear steps to get to the end, to get to the knowing. Now, you could have followed a linear process. Just lost my screen here. You could have followed a linear process to get to that knowing. But when you intuit something, you have a knowing, like, I know this is right. I know whether it's about my kids or work or pick anything, right? It could be about, you could be reading a book and you can kind of sort out, oh, I think I know how this ends. We've all had that experience. But you didn't have to finish the whole book to figure it out. You knew, right? Doesn't say that you aren't going to finish the book, but you kind of know what the end is going to be. So you use your intuition. Your intuition doesn't know time, okay? Because your intuition has skipped all the linear steps, okay, to get to the end. And it's a little bit like you think about this, the example of, I was thinking about my brother, and then two minutes later, he calls me, right? It's your intuition that basically allows you to operate in nonlinear time. It's the same thing with like daydreaming. And look at the picture here of the person sitting on the dock. Daydreaming is nonlinear time. You're actually putting yourself, when you daydream, right? Who knows what this guy's daydreaming about, but maybe he's daydreaming about buying a lake house. And somehow or another, he has taken his current image of himself and he's put himself in a lake house. I'm just postulating this. And so when you daydream, that's also nonlinear, because you're actually putting yourself someplace else. Now you have to go through all the steps probably to get there, all right? But you haven't used all the steps to get there. You've put yourself there first. So that is about, you've put yourself there first and you've moved backwards, okay, doing the steps. So that's another example of nonlinear time. And then, so daydreaming is a really good thing because it actually helps you envision where you want to be or what you might want to be doing or the outcome of a certain event, okay? You've actually put yourself in an outcome of that event, a possible outcome of that event. That's nonlinear time. Then my last example is when people create things, okay, is another example of nonlinear time. So you take, I'm going to use Elon Musk because he's a contemporarily good example. So he had a vision of people having driving electric cars. Now, the Tesla car has gone from being something kind of fun and unique to being like it's a thing. It's not going away, right? It's part of the automotive community now. It's part of the automotive psyche, right? Of not only the United States but even globally. But that started with him skipping all the steps to get there. Okay, the linear steps. It started with him being nonlinear, saying, "Hey, I've got this dream about having a non-fossil fuel environment, and here's one of the ways we get there." And so you have linear time and you have nonlinear time, right? Linear time's the clock, right? And the sequence of events. If someone's building me a product, I want them to follow all the steps to build the product because I want the product, right, to be done right. But if I'm dreaming of the product or I'm trying to envision myself or where I'm going to go, all right, I'm going to be nonlinear about that. I'm going to skip all the time and all the steps in between. I'm going to go right to the end, and then I might move backwards. But in talking about Tesla, for example, and keep losing my screen here. I'm not sure why. And talking about the Tesla product and Musk, right? Everything is created twice, right? Once in your mind and once in reality. And that's actually how you pull time and events towards you, okay? When you can vision something about where you want to be. Now let's talk about things like our health, relationship, our families, our businesses, whatever the case may be, a project that we're working on, we're painting the living room or redecorating the dining room or I don't know, something, any of those things, right? Is that when you start to envision those things, you start to envision yourself in different space, okay? You're actually pulling time and events towards you. Now, if you don't have a vision about something, okay, and you haven't put yourself in that nonlinear aspect, right? Then what's happening is that you're just kind of fumbling your way through it. Maybe you'll get someplace, but it might be a random place. And of course, there's some parts of life that doesn't really matter much, right? But then there's other parts that do. And so when you think about how you create things in your mind, you're basically pulling time and events towards you, okay? And that's where kind of time is a little bit of an illusion, because if you can dream it, you can do it. So I want to introduce a new concept, and I'll equate the time piece and time being illusion to ourselves. And I'm going to introduce this new concept of the me model. And basically the me model is the upgraded versions of ourselves over time and during time. And so in all of our personal journeys, we have to remake ourselves periodically, either willingly or unwillingly. And to do that, and we've talked about this in the past, we actually have to erase much about what we know and our views of ourselves so that we can make room for the new me or the me model, okay? This doesn't mean that, the old me model, right? Me model 1.0 was insufficient or not adequate. It was perfect in the time because of you operating basically on what you knew. And kind of the fun part about this whole process is that you can start to imagine what the new me model looks like. Okay, now all of a sudden, right, we've jumped outside of linear time to nonlinear time, and we're creating a vision for what sometime in the future what I want to look like, right? Or here's what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to speak French, or whatever the case may be. I want to be able to run, a half marathon. Um, and if you think about the people who have made kind of right angle turns in their lives, where they've had reversals of health, from poor health to good health, or recoveries from diseases, or financial recovery. Um, One of the things is to take a look at how much time it took them, because it took the exact amount of time that they laid out. If they thought it was going to take 9 months, it's going to take 9 months. If they thought it was going to take 2 years, it's going to take 2 years. Okay. And so that's a whole other aspect about time. Time generally allocates itself based on how we view it. So and it's like a desk, right? So if I have a desk and I have a 60-inch desk, I'm going to fill my 60-inch desk worth of stuff. If I have a 48-inch desk, okay, I'm only going to fill it with 48 inches of stuff. And so time is that way. If I feel like I have a lot of time, then I'm going to take my time doing things. It's like old adage: if you want something done, give it to a busy person, because they know how to get things done. They have a compressed period of time. And so when we talk about how we evolve, or our me models, okay, we reinvent ourselves and we move through time, but we move through the pace how we envision it. So if we envision it going to take a long time, it's going to take a long time. If we envision it's going to happen quickly, it can happen quickly. And if we stay focused on that vision, whatever it is, okay, and there's no right or wrong to it, maybe the change you're envisioning is so fundamental, so seismic to you, that it's going to take you 2 years to adjust to it. Okay, well, that's perfectly fine. But maybe you're so charged up to get there. Hey, I can do this. I'm ready to do this. I want to do this now. I can get this done in 3 months. Okay. And so as we move through the different versions of ourselves, those different me models, we're constantly upgrading based on the time, okay, that we tell ourselves we can do it in. That's nonlinear, right? That vision of it is nonlinear. And it's a cool thing as we develop, right? So we go from me model, 1.0 to 2.0, to be able to say, well, the old me would have done it this way, but the new me now does it a new way. And then if I go to the me model 3.0, okay, I'm going to look back at the 2.0 model and say, yeah, when I was the 2.0 model, that's how I used to do it. But now I'm here and I do it this way. And there's something really liberating about it, where you are kind to yourself, okay, about in the past, I used to do things a certain way, and now I do things this way. And I know in the future, I'm going to do them differently as well, right? And then how we get there is basically on the amount of time that we vision, the nonlinear part, okay, so that we think we're going to get there. And so what can happen, right, is that we can say, well, obviously I'm going to have to go to school, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and I got to, I can put all these steps in place, and that makes it all very linear, as opposed to kind of a nonlinear view. Well, this is where I want to be, this is where I want to go, and how whatever time compression I apply to it is generally as long as it's going to take me to get it done. And so as we go along and working through how time affects us and how time affects our thought process, also as we evolve, it's important to have forgiveness about ourselves as we look backwards, because we go backwards and we say, well, I used to do it that way. Well, the way you used to do it was based on what you knew. So you can't be tough on yourself about it. You didn't know any better. You didn't know what you know today, right? And that's a very invigorating process when you understand that it's just part of how we all just naturally develop. So personal growth has no speed limit to it. So we're talking about linear time and non-linear time. Your personal growth really has no speed limit. Your ability to grow from one me model of yourself, right, to another is almost solely predicated on your willingness to accept life lessons as the building blocks. And then, as we've talked about, is seeking as much contact with the future as you can. Okay, seeking that contact with the future, again, is all part of being nonlinear. Okay, so how to understand time? So when you're working on things, right, identify what is linear and non-linear time events. Buying the gas grill, I got to put it together. Yep, that's linear. It's going to take me a couple hours, probably a couple like unhappy hours. If I'm going to envision myself speaking Italian, then I can do that pretty quickly. I might not be fluent in it, but I could start to get that I can get that pretty quickly, right? So what's nonlinear and what's linear. I can see myself, in my real estate practice going from $2 million a year in production to $6 million a year. Okay, I can make that happen. Envisioning that and envisioning that is nonlinear. I always like this. Once something is started, it's half finished. In other words, the hard part is just getting started. And how often really do we look at something and we don't start it because we just think it's going to take too long? But one of the great things about it is that once you've started something, it has its own momentum, and then that momentum that we've created in our imagination, we can get it done before we know it. Because how many times have we said, well, that didn't take as long as I thought, right? And then once we've arrived at the new destination, okay, we feel like we've always been there. It's pretty amazing how there's like a time dilation where, we've been in one place or done one thing a certain way for years, and then we did kind of a time jump to I want to be able to do this differently. So we envision it, and then all of a sudden we start to do it differently, and it's like we've always done it that way. And that's also another process of nonlinear time, where we're doing something one way for a long time, and then we switch it up because we kind of chose to do it or we see an opportunity to do it. And then all of a sudden, once you get there, it's like you've always been there. And then the process kind of starts all over again as we start to imagine our new goals, our new destinations, and all that. And I think one of the things that's kind of fun is that when you're going through your day, start to identify, am I in a nonlinear event or a linear event? And it's really kind of fun to do that, right? Where like driving, like I got here at like 5 and 9 this morning, right? Which is unusual for me because I usually leave in plenty of time. It was just bad driving today. I'm sitting there and I'm like, well, this is clearly a linear event, and there's really not much. I'm not gonna be able to jump over all these cars, so I'm here for the ride, all right? Time speeds up and slows down, basically on how we view it. And so if you can start to identify when you're in a linear and a nonlinear event, it helps you then, decide, like if you're daydreaming about, well, I want a new car, or, I want my daughter to go to this college, or whatever the case may be, then, then you're really jumping ahead, right? And you're putting yourself into a future event, and then that's nonlinear time. So how are we doing for questions, comments, chats? Yeah, so Edie's comment, right, is about endless possibilities, and that's true. So I'm going to take, Elon Musk for a minute, right? Just because it's somebody who we've all at least heard of. So he started PayPal. So he envisioned a simpler way for people to buy things, buy merchandise, which was through PayPal. A simple and secure way of doing it. So instead of giving your credit card to the merchant, you give your credit card to PayPal, and then they do the clearing, right? The payment and the clearing of the payment. And then he has a vision for electric cars, right? Less pressure on the environment. Well, now he has another vision for space flight. Okay, and so all of that started like Stephen Covey said, right? Everything gets done twice, once in your mind and once in reality, and those are nonlinear, right? And so when you look at it that way, yeah, it does open up really limitless possibilities. And I think what's always so fascinating, we all go through it, is that you say to yourself, well, I want to do this thing, and this thing, oh my God, this might take 3 weeks, okay? But once you start it and once you get into it, it goes quick. Okay. It goes quick because you envision what the end's going to look like. And then, or it feels like it's gone quicker. It might actually go quicker, right? Like we're talking about with the whole driving thing. And then it's done before you know it. The key though is you started. See, if you don't start, then there's almost no way to finish it, right? And so that's the hard part, is that don't worry about how much time it's going to take. Keep focusing on what you want as an outcome, and start. And when you start, things will speed up. So, other questions, comments? So how do you guys feel about this as a line of discussion for the next couple of weeks? Because there's obviously a lot more to it. Does this feel good? Guys, give me a little bit of feedback on direction. Because there's a lot to it, and it's a lot of fun. You know, we can get into a little bit of quantum physics, how that works, more kind of get into more of the observer effect, all that. So yeah, you know, Angela brought up that good way to get into these changing times, and that really is true, right? I mean, we're having our own kind of nonlinear time dilation. So, all right. So we'll stay in this we'll stay in this line of discussion for a while, and kind of see where it goes. So it's a fun topic, because like Edie said, it does become like what you do realize is that how limitless things really are, right? And I'm not a huge Elon Musk fan, but I do think it's fascinating, the process. He goes from figuring out how to process credit cards to potentially putting people on Mars, right? It's a big gap there, but and it's all happened over a very compressed period of time. Which, if you were to look at the natural timeline of how things get developed, you might say it would take decades, and it's really only taken years. So, all right, well, great to be with everybody, and have an amazing week. Take care.